Good morning. In his famous book, Nobel Prize winner, José Saramago, in his compelling story of an unexplained mass epidemic of blindness, causing pain, panic, living conditions and morals and morale deteriorate horrifically in a very, very short time. Chaos rules, people's worst instincts surface, and social order disintegrates, leaving people confused and helpless. Blindness, in this case, in this book, is a metaphor for both personal misfortune and social catastrophe. I'm quoting 2 or 3 lines from the book. Why did we become blind? I don't know. Perhaps one day we'll find out. Do you want me to tell you what I think? Yes, I do. I don't think we did go blind. I think we are blind. Blind but seeing. Blind people who can see but do not see. In Hebrew, the word for to see is lirot. We have various words for it, but the first word that comes to our mind when we think of seeing is lirot. But when we look into the dictionary and look for a translation of the word lirot, we find very many interpretations. To explore, sight is vision, to understand. Ru'u ki natati lachem et ha-Shabbat. Hashem says in Sefer Shemot, see, I've given you the Shabbat. Hashem is saying, understand, or perhaps even accept. To have an eye for something is to have an inner connection to something, to appreciate something, to focus, to contemplate, interpretation, to believe. Seeing is believing, or is it to reveal? In the story, blindness, to be blind, is not just to be apathetic. To be blind could be to be apathetic. But or not to care. But to be blind can also need a person to destroy anything that reflects godliness in this world. What am I getting at? What am I aiming at in this introduction? According to Kabbalistic masters, for instance, and also for Hasidim, the Hasidut, we have Rabbi Tzadok of Lublin, we have Bnei Yisachar. Every month heralds a different tikkun, which I find very fascinating. In other words, what does that mean? Every month heralds a tikkun. Each month we are supposed to be focusing on a certain area of our being, including, and you'll see the connection, the five senses, and to rectify those senses with the hope that if we've been working on, for instance, the month of Nisan is the month where we are meant to be rectifying our speech. Tikkun ha'peh in Hebrew. Peh, and you know from the Haggadah of Pesach, the entire evening revolves around the Haggadah of Pesach to tell the story. We are in the month of Nisan, for example, we are meant to be focusing on rectifying our speech, using our speech in order to praise, in order to appreciate, in order to say todah, todah, to say thank you, hoping that it will spill over to the following month. Each month we are meant to be focusing on a different area. This coming Shabbat, is Shabbat Mevarachim, and we're about to receive the month of Tamuz, which is kind of even though on one hand it's the month where the sun shines the most, it's the hottest, or perhaps maybe Av is, but certainly one of the hottest months of the year. In terms of what Am Yisrael went through during that month, it's not such a joyful month. Beginning from the beginning of the middle of the month, Shiva Asa B'Tammuz, when we begin the 3 weeks of mourning until we finally reach Tisha B'Av. And the month of Av, the tikkun of this month that we are approaching is tikkun haRaaya, is rectifying our sight, rectifying our perception, learning to see things differently. The Ramban in Igeret HaKodesh explains that every limb that we have is perfect and has been created for a purpose. Anyone who doubts this is doubting the unity of Hashem. The question is, how do we use these limbs? How do we use these parts of our senses, the parts of our body, in order to raise ourselves, in order to, and according to Hasidic sources and in Kabbalah, in order to literally raise the sparks, bring out the sparks from whatever the Hashem has created. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, one of the many expressions that appears in the beginning of Bereshit is Vayar Elokim ki tov, and God saw that it was good. And the verb to see is repeated many times. Before man sinned, he could see from one end of the world to the other. I don't think it was literally that he saw from one end of the world to the other, but I think that it means that his, again, seeing as understanding is that he had levels of understanding that we can't even begin to imagine. The senses before man sinned were heightened. In other words, his sight was clearer. He did well. On a very simple level, he didn't need glasses, but obviously it goes beyond that. Or his taste buds were different than his taste buds today, or whatever he heard in a different way. And perhaps we could even dare to say that before man sinned, even though there were separate senses, they also had the ability to merge, that they fused together. They were heightened. They complemented each other, or they danced in union. I'd like to give you an example of this, and we'll get back to these two examples just to give you like an idea of what I'm referring to. And I'm talking about the senses that were on a different level. Well, on a simple level, when I go into someone's house on Friday and I smell the gefilte fish, I'm not just smelling it, but I'm tasting it and I'm remembering my mother's gefilte fish. It's something that does not happen in my home because none of my children will eat gefilte fish. So I haven't made gefilte fish for many, many years. I think they're more Sephardim than they are Ashkenazim, but whatever. So that regarding like the the sense of smell. By the way, the sense of smell was the only sense that remained intact after man sinned, because if you recall, Batera ha'isha ki tov ha'etz. We have that verse in our second. We have that right on our source sheet here on our source sheet. Batera, it's right at the beginning. Batera ha'isha, the second line, third line down. Ki tov ha'etz lema'achal v'chi ta'ava hi la'inayim v'nechmad ha'etz lahaskil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and it awakened her lust. She saw it as lustful and nechmad, and it was pleasant. The tree was pleasant. Lahaskil, in order to improve maybe her sechel, the word from her skills from sechel. Vatikat mipirio vatochal vatiten gam leisha ima vayochal. And she partook from it and she offered it to her husband and he ate it as well. All the senses participated in the sin of the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge. The only sense that did not directly participate was the sense of smell. Doesn't say she smelled the fruit, though you can assume, though, that if she took up something to eat, you usually do automatically smell it. But this is one of the reasons why on Motzei Shabbat we make a bracha, borei minei besamim, because when we enter the Shabbat, we enter Gan Eden. It's as if we've returned to Gan Eden. And when we leave the Shabbat, we're supposed to feel that we're just, that our extra neshama is leaving us. And in order to survive that situation, we make, with Havdalah, we make borei minei besamim. That's something that I've tried to create over the years, by the way, at home, but it hasn't really worked so well, because usually what happens in my house on Motzei Shabbat is the moment that Havdalah is over, everyone is running to pack and to leave, and I just want them to sing and to just, and I just want to continue the Shabbat and have Shabbat HaMalkah and feel I want to be Belaveh Malkah, I want to accompany the Queen, but it doesn't seem to work. Maybe in a couple of the houses of a couple of my children, it does work, but in my house, it doesn't. Everybody was running home. So getting back to the senses being on a different level, that just to give you an example with Yosef HaTzadik, when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, he said, Atem re'item ki pi v'daber, which means you can see that my mouth speaks. You can see that my mouth speaks. Now that's kind of a funny sentence. You can see that my mouth speaks. We would have expected you can hear me, not you can see. You can see me, but you can see that my mouth speaks. So Rashi there offers a couple of interpretations, but when Rashi offers a couple of interpretations, it means that he's not really absolutely sure that either one of them is the absolute one. Otherwise, he wouldn't bring two interpretations. But I would like to suggest that at that moment, he was on such a heightened level of consciousness that his ability to hear and his ability to speak were fused and together. And I'd like to give even another example, not on an individual level, but on a Klal Yisrael level. When Bnei Yisrael received the Torah, it says there in Parshat Yitro, they saw the voices. They saw the voices. They saw the voices. So to see the voices is obviously is referring to a chibur, togetherness, a oneness. They were Vayichad Yisrael, Keneged they were as one, and all the senses were heightened on such a level. And Chazal teach us that they received such a level of greatness that it was almost as if they had returned to the level of Adam HaRishon before he sinned. Our goal, among many goals and many missions that we have in life, is to restore our vision, is to improve our perception of the world, to see the world in a positive light. Just to give you a few examples of how seeing is so central, especially in the Torah, but especially I see in Bereshit. I'm not going to give all the examples because there are many, but I'm just going to enumerate some of these examples. If you all recall Parshat Vayera, Parashat Bereshit, Vayera elav Hashem be'elonei Mamre, and God appeared to Abraham at Elonei Mamre, v'hu yoshev befetach ha'ohel k'chom hayom, and he's sitting at the entrance of the tent in the middle of the day. Rashi teaches us it was Brit Milah, and that it was the third day of his Brit Milah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to visit the sick. And Abraham is having, as if to say, a meeting with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. He sees Vayera Ilav Hashem. And then all of a sudden he sees these angels who he doesn't know that there are angels. He thinks they are maybe people that are served the idol worship, because afterwards he tells them to wash their feet from Avodah Zarah. Chazal teach us. But what I wanted to point out here is at the beginning of Parshat Vayera, the word to see, Vayera ila Vayera, and he saw, he lifted up his eyes and he saw. So to see, first of all, you see on the Pshat that how central this is. He saw and he saw. And so when a person says, oh, I didn't see, oh, I'm sorry that I bumped into you, I didn't see you, I was, I'm sorry I didn't get up for you on the bus, I didn't see you. What do you mean I didn't see you? You're meant to see. Lift up your eyes and see. Avraham Avinu was meditating, and he was at one with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and yet he opens up his eyes and he sees. He doesn't ignore the surroundings. Be aware. Open up your eyes. See. Look. If your neighbor needs something, if a relative is in trouble, open up your eyes and see. And because Avraham Avinu opened up his eyes and he saw, he merits that Hashem nira elav, that Hashem appears to him. And not only, and that's the beginning of the parsha. And at the end of Parshat Vayera, we have the famous story of the Akedat Yitzchak. And one of the key verbs that appear in Akedat Yitzchak is seeing. And they saw the place from afar, and they saw, and at the end of the Akedah, Avraham Avinu realizes that he's on a very, very special place. He's on Har HaMoriah, and he calls the place, what does he call it? Hashem Yir'eh. Hashem will see. Hashem Yir'eh. If we look very carefully at the word lir'ot, if you change the letters round, you have the word yir'ah, which means fear. Fear, but not fear to be scared, but awe. In other words, if we, part of our rectifying our vision, or the way of perceiving the world, is by fulfilling Shiviti Hashem Kenegdi Tamid, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always in front of me, is always before me, then he is working on the midah of Yirat Hashem, of feeling Hashem's presence, not scared, but feeling the feeling. In other words, it's not just seeing, but it's the totality, that experience, that total experience where you feel that just as you would, you'd be very careful. Lahavdil, if the King Charles is invited here for the morning, that we'd be very, very more careful about the way we conduct ourselves. Lahavdil, how much more so when we feel the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So here in the parsha of the Akedat Yitzchak, it's quite clear that because of Avraham Avinu seeing his re'iyah, his being aware, and not just being aware, but acting upon that by being a chesed, a Baal chesed, that he opens up his home for the angels to come, even though he does not the angels. In other words, he is nurturing the midah of chesed, which comes from re'iyah, opening up your eyes and being aware. He merits yirat Hashem, and he merits yirat Hashem. So at the end of the parsha, Parshat Vayera, is that he calls the place. He's able to identify the most holy place. Or it could be the other way around, that because he works on feeling Hashem's presence, he sees Hashem's presence in every single person, because each and every one of us reflects godliness in this world, and therefore automatically will be more sensitive to the other person and will respect the other person. if we look further, our next Tanakh hero is Yitzchak Avinu. And as we learn, the end of the beginning of Parshat Toldot, his eyes were dim. His eyes were dim. In other words, the impact of the Akedah has left its mark on him. Is it a technicality? Is he blind? He really does not see? Well, we could say that, but on the other hand, without going into length now on Parshat Toldot, when he comes to give the bracha, he knows, or does he know, who he's giving the bracha to. But it's beyond that. Yitzchak Avinu has been referred to as a survivor. I saw something written by Aviva Zornberg on this, and I saw also something written by the Rav of Efrat. His name has just left my mind for a moment. Sorry? Rav Riskin, yes, he also wrote on this. I remember reading something in the Jerusalem Post that he wrote about Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu is a survivor. He's walked through the valley of death. He will never see the world in the same light. And perhaps the blindness, well, again, I mentioned Dr. Aviva Zornberg maintains that his blindness was a delayed action, a response to trauma. And there are various surveys on people that went through traumas and they didn't see. So it isn't just a physical, we're not talking about something just physical, but an emotional, a spiritual, a psychological limitation. Or is it a limitation? Okay. Let me just read here at the beginning. There's one of the first sources. The second, you've just read Vatera Isha. So we're going back to Bereshit here. Ki yodea Elokim ki biyom achalchem imenu v'nifkachu einechem v'yitem ki Elokim yodei tov v'ra. And the snake says, God knows that if you partake of this fruit, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and bad. And there Rashi says, that's the next source, and their eyes were opened. לעניין החוכמה דיבר הכתוב, ולא לעניין ראייה ממש. בסוף המקרא מוכיח. In other words, what Rashi is saying is that it's not a physical thing that her eyes will be opened. Her eyes were open. But it's referring to wisdom, to chokhmah, that she would have a certain wisdom, that she would have a certain ability, she would gain an ability to understand in a way that she does not understand at present. So here again, it's reinforcing what we were saying before, that seeing isn't just, okay, glancing, but it's also understanding, it's also being aware of, it's also interpreting. And the Radak, which is the next source, Vatera Isha, she believed the words of the snake. And she thought in her heart, again, seeing is believing. She sees the nachash and she's believing. She believes him. She sees in her heart. She has a sense that this is going to be worthwhile, that this is going to be very interesting. By the way, the name Chava comes from the word Chavaya, which a Chavaya is an experience. She was looking for a kef. She was looking for an experience. The next biblical hero that I'd like to relate to is Yaakov Avinu, who for 22 years suffered not knowing whether Yosef was alive or not. And when he finally is told that his son is alive, and he says, there's a key word there, is also to see. And it says there, I have not seen him since. And then it says, how does he know that this is Yosef? Because he sees the wagons. Yosef had sent his father wagons. And according to the Midrash, the wagons are reminiscent of the last Torah passage that they had studied together, evoking memory. And only then does his spirit reawaken. In other words, what they had learned, without going into detail, is they had learned the din of Egla Arufa, the din that if a dead body is found in a field and people don't know who hurt this person, who neglected this person, who killed this person, then the elders of the city, the nearest city, they measure and they see which is the nearest city. And then there's a whole tekes where they take an egla, how do you say an egla in English? Sometimes I'm looking for a word, a calf. Sorry? A calf, right. And they cut it off, they go through a head there, the tekes, and they say what they say. Our hands did not spill this blood. We didn't do this. But the word egla comes from the word galui, and ayin, egla. What is egla? Ayin gimel lamed hey. Ayin is an ayin. It's a letter ayin, right? But it's also I. And then immediately after you've got gimel lamed hey. Egla is an eye that sees. In other words, it's symbolic of our eye did not see this. They should have seen. In other words, had they taken care of this stranger when he had come to their city, when you see somebody walking into the Bet Knesset and you don't know him, you go up to him afterwards and you say, Shabbat Shalom. Are you new in the area? Open up your eyes and see. So this is a remez, this is a hint, the egla, to ayin legalot et ha'ayin.
But doesn't the pasuk finish off with the enenu lo?
And we didn't see, but we should have seen, And only then, Yaakov Avinu, after he sees the galot, it evokes memory. Seeing has to do with memory, which there's a saying in Chazal, which I can't just snap that out, the quote exactly where it comes from, that there's a connection between seeing and remembering. And only then does his spirit reawaken. He says, now I can die since I have seen that you are alive. Now I can die since I have seen that you are alive. But it's not just seeing him. Oh, wow, I've just seen my son. I haven't seen him for all these years. But it's accepting now. It's a point of acceptance. And it's coming to terms with the situation. But what does he see? When he sees the agalot, when he sees the wagons, he sees that Yosef has not forgotten his limud. He hasn't forgotten, and that if he hasn't forgotten, it means that he is still learning. And if you already mentioned Yosef, Yosef, we have here in our source sheet on Yosef. Let me just find that. There you go. Yosef. You have on the source number Yud Gimel. It's the Gemara. It's the Masechet. It's Masechet Brachot. Amalahu ana mizara de Yosef ka'atina delo shalta be ina bisha. We are from the seed, from the children of Yosef, who the ayin ra'ah did not affect Yosef. And then immediately afterwards, on the same source, ben porat Yosef ben porat alei ayin. Va'amar Rabbi Abahu al tikrei alei ayin ela olei ayin. And they learn it from the Yitku l'rov b'kerev haaretz. It's the bracha that Yosef Tzaddik receives, the bracha that they will increase his protege will increase like the fish in the sea. Ma dagim shabayam. It's the same source, Yud Gimel. Ma dagim shabayam mayim mechasin alehem ve'ein ayin hara sholetet bahem. Just as the sea, the fish in the sea are covered up, and the evil eye does not have any effect on them. Af zar'o shel Yosef ein ayin hara sholetet bahem. It doesn't have an effect on Yosef. The ayin ra'ah. The end of the quote. Ayin shelo ratzta lazun mima she'eno shelo. An eye that does not want to be provided for by someone else. Ein ayin hara sholetet bo. This actually brings us to another point regarding the rectification of seeing, of not losing our vision, of mentioned before, doing chesed will help us to enhance our vision, and enhancing our vision and being aware of what's going around us. But there's something, now there's another point here with Yosef. Excuse me. I'm quoting now from a shiur by Rav Ari Khan, and who quotes Rav Soloveitchik, who says the following. He says he says like this: Rabbi Soloveitchik once suggested that there's a difference between an evil eye describing a trait and the destructive evil eye. The latter is more of an outlook. And then he continues, and he says, to feel miserly is a manifestation of this negative trait. To be generous is a manifestation of the positive good eye. Now we come back to Yosef HaTzadik. According to all logic, the evil eye should hover over him. After all, we learn about Yosef HaTzadik that he was very handsome. And in fact, we learn that all the young girls would climb on the walls of Egypt, and they would hang on over the walls to take a look at him. So, according to all logic, the result would be that it would awaken the ayin ra'ah. Now, the ayin ra'ah is, again, there could be a separate shiur where we could just discuss the idea, the whole concept of ayin ra'ah and ayin tovah, because many people, usually it's the litbacks, right? It's you that will say, there's just no such thing as ayin ra'ah. The Rambam says there's no such thing as ayin ra'ah. But on the other hand, again, without expanding on this, because otherwise we're going into too many directions. But on the other hand, if a man and his son go to shul and they get called up to the Torah, they don't get called up one after the other. Why not? Because of ayin ra'ah. So here we see an example that in even the ayin ra'ah, the concept of ayin ra'ah even touches upon halakha. I can give you another example here. One of the sources here. Source hey with Yaakov. Rashi Bereshit Parshat Miketz. You got it? You have it? Rashi Bereshit Parshat Miketz. Batoch Habaim, the people that came. It's referring to the sons of Yaakov when they came to Egypt. Batoch Habaim, they came. Matminin atzman shelo yakirum. They hid themselves so that they would not be recognized. Lefi shetziva lahem avihem, because their father, Yaakov Avinu, had commanded them, shelo yitra'u kulam befetach echad, that they shouldn't enter the city by one gate. Ela sheyikanes kol echad befitcho. Each and every one should enter Egypt from a different entrance. Kedei shelo tishlot bahem ayin hara. So that what do we say? What did we say when we were in Chutzaretz? Kanei Nahara. But what do these Sfardim say? Ben Porat Yosef. So much nicer to say Ben Porat Yosef. Ben Porat Yosef. So that the Ayin Hara should not be upon them. The Kulam Giborim, and they were all very na'im. They were very handsome, and they were already, and they had great stature. And in the next source, the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Bava Metzia, the Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Asor lo la'adam, sheya'amod al sadeh chavero b'sha'a she'omedet b'kamoteha. A person is not allowed to stand near the field of his friend when it's giving off abundance. I can just think of an example, like we have a porch and the porch faces the neighbor and the neighbor has a pomegranate tree. So according to this, I wouldn't be allowed to stand on my porch and stare at the pomegranate tree of the neighbor. And I could tell myself from today to tomorrow, well, I'm not jealous, I'm not putting upon him an ayin ra'ah. But on the other hand, there is something in this. Yesh b'zeh mashu. There is something in this. Who was it who stood near the mikveh? I think it was he stood. Who was it that stood near the mikveh? Was it Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan. And why did he stand near the mikveh? Men are not allowed to stand near the mikveh and see who comes out. But anyway, we won't go into that. But the idea was that the women that were coming out, they would see him, they would look at him, and they would become pregnant and they would have beautiful children because he was very, very handsome. And when they would ask him, well, what is this? And he said, I am from the Zara Shel Yosef. The ayin, the anon hara, the ayin hara does not, has no power over me. But how come Yosef, again, coming back, that the Yidgu Larov B'Kerav Haaretz, that he was blessed, that the ayin ra'ah does not have an effect on him. It was because he did not, we read this in the source, he didn't enjoy the bazon, the food or the luxuries of other people, but he enjoyed his own, the fruits, as we said at the end of the Eishes Chayil, Tenu la mipri yadeha, give her of the fruits of her hands. But I think there's something else here. I think that if we all focus on what we have, and we believe that what we have is what we need and what Hashem wants us to have, and we don't look at what the other person. I'm thinking, what's coming to my mind is on Shavuot, on Erev Shavuot, I was studying with one of my grandchildren who's in second grade, and I said to him, Lo tachmod is written in the Torah, Lo tachmod. You shouldn't have taivas. You shouldn't. But how can you not Lo tachmod if you see that the other person, your neighbor has a much more newer car and he has a prettier garden, and how can Hashem command you over your feelings? So this little kid in second grade says, Shelo yistakel. He shouldn't look, just like that. It was like so completely natural. So the point with Yosef is that Yosef is focusing on what he has and appreciates what he has. And I can't remember which Hasidic master, I think there's more than one Hasidic master said this. I think this was the Rebbe of Slonim that said that if everybody would realize that whatever they have, for the good and for the bad, and if they want what the other person has, that it's a package deal, that he'll get his test as well, then he'll prefer to remain with what he has. Last Shabbat we read Parshat Shalach Lecha. The key word one of the key words in Parshat Shalach Lecha. I did not photocopy it. I wanted to go through quite many examples here, but you can take a look at it afterwards, and you can see that the root lirot, ru'et haaretz, and see the land and see, and then they come back and they say we saw them and we saw the giants. And the other key word in last week's parsha is latur, which means to it means there to spy out. Latur et haaretz, but it really means to sojourn. Latur, like a tayar, but a tayar is someone who looks and sees and appreciates and praises and says, wow, isn't it amazing that Yerushalayim is constantly being built, and it doesn't matter that we get stuck in a traffic jam for an hour and a half, because after all, Yerushalayim is spreading its wings and it's reaching out, and it's awesome. The two key words of Parshat Shalach Lecha are lirot and Datur, and they lead us to where they failed, not just as individuals, but collectively. They see selectively. They interpret subjectively. What does it say there? And there we saw the giants, and we were as grasshoppers in their eyes. And of course, you're all familiar, no doubt, with Rabbi, I think it was the Rabbi Tzadok who said this. Maybe I'm making a mistake, but there's one of the great Hasidic giants who said, the way that you perceive yourselves is where the other person sees you. If you see yourself as a grasshopper, then the other person will also see you as a grasshopper. So that leads us, of course, as well to reminds me of Rabbi Nachman, because Rabbi Nachman talks about ayin tova, a good eye, but not in regard so much to the other person, appreciating the other person, being mefargen them. I don't know whether there's a word in English for to be mefargen. You know why I don't think there's a word in English for mefargen? Because I don't think the British are mefargen. So there isn't a word for it. But we are mefargen. What does that mean? An example is Moshe and Aaron. When Moshe comes back from Midian, he doesn't want to lead the Bnei Yisrael. He says, I have a brother who's older than me. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, V'samach b'libo. In other words, he's not going to say, yofi, yofi, with a kind of a false smile, but really be very envious. But he's samach b'libo, he's mefargen. He's thrilled for the great privilege and for the great zechut that Moshe Rabbeinu receives to lead the Bnei Yisrael. Going back to the story of the spies and those who see us, I know what I wanted to say about Rabbi Nachman. Okay, 1 second, I'll go back to the spies. And so we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. The way that you perceive yourself is the way that the other person will perceive you. And therefore, Rabbi Nachman says in Yukutei Maharan, in more than one place, that you have to see, he says, lirot et hanekuda hatova b'tochecha. You have to see that inner spark in you. Don't be self-critical. It's true, we have times where we do tshuva, exceptional tshuva, the yamim noraim, where we make a din v'cheshbon. But generally speaking, a person, according to Rabbi Nachman, he says, if you look into yourself, you will see that you definitely have something good going for you there. Wasn't it the film, The Sound of Music? What does Maria say? I must have done something good. You must have done something good. We've all done something good. So we have to focus on that something good that we've done. And then Rabbi Nachman says, when we hear a voice, an inner voice that says to us, oh yeah, you did something good. It was really because you wanted people to tell you that, oh, you're a great person. Or because you wanted to see your name flashing on some wall somewhere. Rabbi Nachman says, that is the Yetzer Hara. You just tell him to geyavek. Just tell him to get lost. And you just tell yourself, you have done something good. Don't make the cheshbon, oh, maybe it was because of this, maybe it was because of that. There's a story, a true story of all these, of Rav Nachama Leibovich, was teaching in a particular school, and the principal of the school, a student approached him in 10th grade and asked him if she could be a madricha in Bnei Akiva. So the principal said to her, if you want to be a madricha, because you want to contribute and because you want to have hashpa'ah, you want to influence the younger children, then go ahead. But if you just want to meet some guy there, you want for the social life, then I'm not giving you permission. Now, he told this to Nechama Leibovich, and she said to him like this. Oh, she was amazing. I had the privilege to learn with her. She was my teacher. She said, no, she should go. And then she said, I come here and I teach. I don't know why I'm coming here to teach. Maybe because I'm running away from loneliness. Maybe because I want people to tell me, wow, what an amazing shiur you gave. I don't know all the ins and outs, all the why but it's something good. And if it's something good, it's good. It's intrinsically good. And therefore, she said to the principal, she should go ahead, this girl, and be a madricha. So Rabbi Nachman is saying, you look into yourself and you tell yourself, wow, I invited somebody who was lonely for a Shabbos meal. Well, maybe I did it because I wanted my neighbors to see that I'd invited them. But no, you just push that away. You just look at the Nekudat Tova. You look at the Nekudat Tova. In modern psychology, Dreikos, Adler, if a mother comes to me and says to me, I'm having serious problems with my son. He's such a satlan, he's such a batlan. He doesn't get up in the morning until I'm yelling at him like 10 times and then finally get him to get out of bed. When he comes home, he doesn't do his homework. He doesn't clean up his room. He doesn't relate nicely to his sister. And she goes on and on and on. And of course, I'm using I'm listening, but I wouldn't want to hear her without seeing her. So if she calls me up on the telephone and says, I want to talk to you about my son, I tell her, look, I want you to come here. I want to see you because there's body language and I want to see her face and I want to see how she reacts to what I'm saying. But again, one point. I would tell her after her story and after I have displayed empathy, I will tell her, of everything that you brought up, just choose one point, one point, something good. Look at something good that he does and enhance that. Encourage him on with that one point. Oh, he does the dishes. So tell him, I really appreciate, I can see, I'm aware of it. I can see that, and I know that you're busy and I know that you want to go to that football match, but you're doing those dishes. Look for one good point, because what happens is it's like popcorn. When you make popcorn, once one jumps, they all begin to jump. When you look at and focus on one good point, then you see all the, then all of a sudden there's another point and another point. Seeing, you said seeing is believing, or is it? Partially, I would say so, because if you look at the end of Parshat Beshalach, not the end, but before the end, Az Yashir Moshe, we say that every morning in our tefillah, but before we say Az Yashir, it says Vayiru, that they saw and they saw, the people saw, they saw the Yad Hashem, they saw, and then in Parshat Beshalach, and then it says Vayabinu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe Avdo. And Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe Avdo, it's not just they saw and they believed, but it's an inner conviction. It's something that doesn't rely on the findings of the human eye. It's a kind of eighth sense. The eyes, going back to the eyes of the spies, the eye of the spy, rhymes. The eye of the spy would be the eyes of the people, the eyes that should have yearned for the land, been moved, excited. Those were the eyes that shed tears on that tragic night of Tisha B'Av. Tears of sorrow, tears that flood the path of Jewish history for generations. The end of Parshat Shalach Lecha that we read last week talks of the mitzvah of tzitzit. Look at source number 4, Dalet. One of the key words in mitzvah tzitzit is Uri'item otam lo taturu achrei levavchem v'achrei anichem asher atem zonim achreihem. It corresponds to the beginning of the parsha, Parshat HaMeraglim, and Parshat Tzitzit. Parshat Tzitzit corresponds to Parshat HaMeraglim. And the source, it says the following in the Gemara: Ela chutshot chelet mahi detani. What is this? What is this? What is special about chelet? By the way, the word chelet, which means blue, a blue thread, comes from the word tachlit, which means purpose, which means aim. Because blue reminds us of the sea, the yam domela akia, and the sea reminds us of the sky. V'rakia domela kisei kavod. And when you imagine the sky or look up to the sky, we think of the kisei, the throne of glory. שנאמר ויראו את אלוהי ישראל ותחת רגליו כמעשה לבנת הספיר וכעצם השמיים לטהר וכולי. In other words, when you focus on something, when you look at something, you don't just look at it, but you internalize it. And therefore, person is advised, even people like to see exciting suspense movies, they shouldn't see the movies just before they go to sleep, because they'll end up dreaming of those movies. So lahavdil, the idea of the tzitzit, the mitzvah of tzitzit is a rectification of the sin of the meraglim. They looked at the land in a way, in a subjective way. They had what's called in Hebrew and in English Hayalahem agenda. They had an agenda, and therefore their view, their vision, their interpretation was to start off with lechatchila. It was very, very undesirable and ended up in the loss of an entire generation. There's definitely a question that I'd like to raise here, but I'm not going to answer it. I'm just going to throw it out. And that is, the sea and the heart desires. But in the Parsha of Tzitzit, it says, Lo taturu achrei levavchem v'achrei anichem. Don't go after your heart and your eyes. So what is first? Is it the heart that desires and the eye that seeks what the heart desires, or is it the other way around? And as we know, Jews always argue. So there are different opinions, and it's something to study and something to think about. In another 2 or 3 weeks, we will be reading Parshat Bilam. The source tells us, who is Bilam? He's a prophet. He was endowed with unusual powers. He was phenomena, but the Torah teaches us that he was blind in one eye. So much so that it appears as the introduction to his blessings. And now I'm going to quote the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov maintains that the outer senses are to be refined in order that the inner senses be worthy for Kedusha. It is the outer senses that meet with reality. Bilam was not really worthy of prophecy because, as we all know, he had defiled his senses. So we have a paradoxical situation where the blindness, he was blind in one eye, but it was being blind in one eye that enabled him to see, to have the prophecy. In other words, that which limits him, blindness, is what gives him merit. I'm hesitating here because is blindness a boon or is it a curse? We started off our shiur quoting a short passage from a famous book, Blindness. And so from what we started off with, we would we can understand that it's not a blessing. It isn't a blessing. On the other hand, it isn't a blessing to be blind. It's not a blessing to be apathetic. It's not a blessing. It isn't a blessing to not to care. That all has to do with seeing. Seeing is a gift. But I'm bringing back Rabbi Nachman, and why I'm hesitating, because it brings us to points to ponder. There is a famous story by Rabbi Nachman, which is called Maaseh b'Shiv'a Kaptzanim, the story of the 7 beggars. Each beggar has a limit. One is blind, one is deaf, one stutters, one has a hunchback. Each one has a certain migbala, has some kind of a deficiency, a physical deficiency. Each one comes to bless a couple that have just got married. The first beggar is the blind beggar. He's the blind one. And what does he say? He says, it's a very long story. I'm just going to pull out one point. He says, you think I'm blind. You think I'm blind, but I'm not really blind, because I can see further than anybody else. And then he brings a story of a group of people, and each one says, I remember when I was born. And then he says, I remember. Then another one comes along and says, I remember when the branch was broken off. In other words, when the umbilical cord was cut. And each one, as if to say, shows off to say, how far back does he remember? And the blind man comes along and he says, but I remember even further back than any of you, because I remember Ha'ein Sof. And the Ein Sof is never ending. In other words, it's the furthest point even above time. Mystical. Rabbi Nachman's stories are, I think they are, one of the beauties of Rabbi Nachman's stories is a child could read the story and appreciate it, and an old lady like I could also read the story and appreciate the depth of the story. So from here we are hearing that this is the plus, it's a gain. In other words, what happens is that when a person loses one sense, then another sense will come along and compensate for it. So when we think of this kind of blindness, that when we say Shema Yisrael, what do? We cover our eyes. Why do we cover our eyes? We cover our eyes in order to lidbonen, to meditate, to focus inwardly, to try, or when a man stands to daven in the morning, he takes his talit with the blue thread. Today, it's also many people wear with the tzitzit with the blue thread already. There's a source of techelet, which I won't go into, and they wrap themselves around with the talit with the blue thread in order to, it's like entering a state of blindness, ki'ilu, as if to say, losing vision. Of course, one doesn't lose vision. On the contrary, to enhance the inner eye, to use the eye. There are 2 eyes. One eye is for seeing a spiritual world, and the other eye is to see the physical world, as if to say. Bilam's eye was covered because he interprets the physical world in a lowly manner. But we have the ability to use our right eye and to affect the left eye, so that the left eye becomes, as if to say, a stage as well. Together with the right eye, they work in harmony, because we do live in a physical world, in order to see the physical world in a positive way, as we just mentioned before, looking at Yerushalayim and all the thing that's going on, as opposed to seeing all the pkakim, the traffic jams, to use our eye in a way which is good, where we see ourselves in a good way, where we appreciate who we are and we're not dependent upon other people in order to appreciate ourselves. And the decisions that we make is according to the way that we can always discuss with another person and see their point of view, but ultimately we have to take responsibility for the decisions that we make. One way, again, another way of enhancing and improving our vision, of course, is learning Torah. The more we learn Torah, the more we expand, and the more we refine our midot. And so that's another way of improving our vision this month. Let me just finish by reading these two sources from just maybe one of them. The Mishnah Masechet Avot. This is Kol mi sheyesh, source number Yud. Kol mi sheyesh biyado shlosha dvarim alalu mitamidav shel Avraham Avinu, ושלושה דברים אחרים מתלמידיו של בלעם. If a person has these three attributes, he's like Avraham Avinu, and if he has the other ones, he's like Bil'am, Parasha. Ayin Tova, Ruach Nemucha, humility, Benefesh Shvela, which is similar to humility, seeing who you are, appreciating who you are. Mitamidav shel Avraham Avinu. Ayin Ra'ah, Ruach Gavoa, Benefesh Rachava, which is the opposite. מתלמידיו של בלעם, הרשע. מה בין תלמידיו של אברהם אבינו לתלמידיו של בלעם, הרשע? What's the difference between the תלמידים of Abraham and the תלמידים of בלעם, הרשע? תלמידיו של אברהם אבינו אוכלים בעולם הזה ונאכלים בעולם הבא, שנאמר, להנחיל אוהבי יש ואוצרותיהם המלא. אבל תלמידיו של בלעם הרשע יורשים גידם ויורדים לבאר שחת. שנאמר, ואתה אלוקים תורידם לבאר שחת. אנשי דמים ומרמה לא יחצו ימיהם, ואני אפתח בם. In other words, those who work on the midah of tzliut, in other words, not showing off what I bought or how accomplished our children are, or what a great guy my husband is, or my wife is, but not to to show to everybody, but just like to be tsanua and to be humble. And it does not mean that we need to be knocking ourselves down. On the contrary, it means to appreciate who we are, to see what we have and what we're able to do. And that if Hashem has bestowed upon us certain qualities, it means that we have an obligation to, first of all, to ourselves, but it also we have also an obligation to our family members and our friends around us, that we have a mechuyavut. But if I remain within just myself, then I'm very, very selfish. So it means to be generous. It means to have an ayin tova. To have an ayin tova, it means to lefargen. And Bezrat Hashem, we should all, Bezrat Hashem merit that this year, as we just started off the shir by saying this is the month of Tamuz, which where Shiva Asaba Tamuz, we begin the 3 weeks. I offer my tefillot that these 3 weeks will be transformed from a time of sadness and mourning to a time of joy, and we merit the building of the Bet HaMikdash. Toda rabah.
Every חודש אלול, when she came to blow shofar in the garden.
In the garden. What you in the garden? You go to the garden to blow. How beautiful!
It was very nice. And children are very proud of it. They told me stories. I do it for a blue grandson was so I noticed that all the children would put their fingers in their ears. So I said, you put your hands over your speech, contemplate history. Going back 2,000 years, every generation will show. Not just close your ears, close your eyes. Think. We've got great
children, absolutely. Now with the great grandchildren, absolutely beautiful. My husband was wounded during the 6-Day War. Every year he would go, and still does it, goes to different schools where his children are. And now he goes to the schools for the grandchildren.
Yes,
Give him his blessings that he'll be able to put in schools of the great grandchildren as well.
Something like France during the 6-Day War. Sorry, he lost his twin in Bush. After the 6-Day War, the Jordanian soldiers brought him back with twins.
Yes.
Can you imagine? From 48 to